My name is Cyril de Belmont, and I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I was not a woman who saw herself as a fighter. For 22 years, I was the one who kept the peace. The one who softened the edges, absorbed the tension, and made sure the holidays went smoothly and the dinner parties looked effortless. I was the woman who made things work. Thaddeus knew that about me. He had always known it. I think that's exactly why he believed I would never see it coming. We met in 1999 at a conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a junior marketing coordinator. He was already climbing, sharp, magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately made you want to know what he was thinking. We married in 2002. A September wedding. Crisp air, gold leaves, the whole thing. We built something real. A home in Raleigh. 2 kids. Our son Waverly, now 20, and our daughter Pemba, now 17. A business I helped him launch from a folding table in our guest room. An accounting and financial consulting firm that, by 2019, had 7 employees and over $4 million in annual revenue. I did not get a salary. I was his wife. I handled the branding, the early client relationships, the late nights when he doubted himself. I made the business look legitimate before it was legitimate. That's important. Remember that. By 2024, Thaddeus and I had what looked, from the outside, like a successful marriage. We didn't fight often. We traveled twice a year. Our kids were healthy and thriving. But there were things I had started to feel that I couldn't quite name. A distance, a precision to how he spoke to me, like his words were being carefully managed. Warmth without intimacy. Presence without connection. I told myself it was stress. His firm had landed a major regional contract, and he had been working late for months. I told myself it was just a season. I had no idea the season had already ended for him, 8 months before I ever found that document. I wasn't even supposed to be in his office that evening. I just needed to print a banana bread recipe for my neighbor, Claudette, who had been texting me about it all week. My laptop was upstairs charging. His was right there on the desk, open, screen still glowing. I clicked print, and that's when the last open document loaded onto the screen. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't work emails. It wasn't anything I could have braced myself for. It was a 14-page legal document. And at the top, in clean, formal font, the kind of font that makes your stomach drop because it means something is official, were the words. In re, the marriage of Thaddeus Orrin Belmont and Cyrilda Jean Belmont. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed date, 8 months ago. I stood there, so long the screen went to sleep. And in the dark reflection of that black screen, I saw my own face, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Because in 8 months, my husband Thaddeus had kissed me good morning. He had sat across from me at dinner and asked about my day. He had held my hand at my mother's birthday party and told our friends how lucky he was. He had done all of that, while carrying a plan to end our marriage that I knew absolutely nothing about. The banana bread recipe printed. I took the paper off the printer. I walked to Claudette's house. I smiled. I said goodnight. And then I came home, sat in my car in the dark driveway, and I made a decision. Not to confront him. Not yet. Not to cry. Not yet. First, I was going to find out everything. And what I found over the next 30 days would not just change my marriage. It would completely dismantle the life Thaddeus thought he had already won. Stay with me, because this story does not go where you think it's going. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. That night, I lay next to Thaddeus, his breathing slow and steady, completely untroubled, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about what I actually knew. He had filed. He had already filed. 8 months ago. But he hadn't served me. He hadn't told me. For 8 months, he had maintained our entire marriage, our routines, our affection, our family dinners, while holding active dissolution papers. Why? That was the question that would not let me rest. Why file and then wait? Why not simply tell me? I knew enough to know there was only one real answer to that question. He was waiting for something, and I needed to know what. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. I made coffee. I asked about his schedule. I kissed him on the cheek when he left. And the moment his car pulled out of that driveway, I sat down at my own laptop and I called the one person I trusted completely. My college roommate, Dorinda Vance, who, as it happened, had spent the last 12 years practicing family law in Durham. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Serilda, don't touch anything. Don't move any money. Don't confront him.
Come see me today."
I was in her office by 11. Dorinda spread the facts out like a case file. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets are divided based on what is fair, which doesn't always mean 50-50, but it does mean the court considers each spouse's contributions to the marriage. Then she asked about the firm. "Your name isn't on it, is it?" "No," I said. "We talked about adding me early on, but Thaddeus said it was cleaner with one name." Dorinda looked at me steadily. "And the home?" "Both names," I told her. "Savings? Investments?" "His accounts," I said. "We always said it was simpler." She set her pen down. "Serilda," she said carefully, "I think your husband has been restructuring for a very long time." She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, with Dorinda's guidance, I began pulling at threads I never knew existed. Thaddeus had, over the course of approximately 3 years, quietly redirected significant firm revenues into a separate LLC, a holding company registered in Delaware under a name I had never heard in my life. Orlon Capital Advisors, LLC. The firm's growth that I had attributed to his hard work, the new contracts, the expanded client base, a substantial portion of those profits had been flowing sideways into that entity. He had not taken money out of our joint accounts. He had simply made sure the new money never came in. He wasn't hiding what we had. He was hiding what we were supposed to have. And he had been doing it for 3 years. I sat with that number. 3 years. Waverly had just started college when Thaddeus began building his exit strategy. He had sat at Waverly's graduation dinner and toasted our family's future, and he was already constructing a financial architecture designed to leave me with as little as possible. I didn't cry. I felt something go very, very quiet inside me. And that is when I stopped being the woman who kept the peace. Now here is where the story takes a turn that even I did not expect. About 3 weeks after I found the divorce papers, my daughter Pemba came and sat beside me on the back porch one evening. Pemba is 17, perceptive in the way children who grow up watching their parents closely become perceptive. Quiet. Careful. "Mom," she said. "Can I ask you something without you asking me where I heard it?" "Yes," I told her. She looked at her hands. "Is Dad moving to Asheville?" The air went completely still. I asked her calmly what made her think that. She told me she had been in the car when he was on a phone call. He didn't know she had her earbuds out. He was talking about a lease, an apartment. And then he said, she paused, he said she would love the mountains. I put my hand over hers. "Okay, baby," I said. "Thank you for telling me."
She.
There it was. The reason for the timing. The reason he filed without telling me. He wasn't just leaving the marriage. He had somewhere and someone to go to. He needed the financial restructuring locked in place before the divorce was finalized so his new life could begin fully funded. I called Dorinda that night. She wasn't surprised. But what she told me next, that is the part that truly changed everything. Dorinda had spent the previous week quietly reviewing the firm's client history alongside the Orlon Capital Advisors formation documents. And she had found something. The Delaware LLC had been formed 22 months earlier. But the first capital contribution to that account, the very first deposit, had come from a client invoice. A client named Reva Stanton. Reva Stanton had become a client of Thaddeus's firm 19 months ago. She ran a mid-sized interior design company based out of Charlotte. According to the firm's own records, she had been referred in as a new account. But Dorinda had dug further. Reva Stanton and Thaddeus Belmont had a shared history that predated her becoming a client by nearly a year. She wasn't a referral. She was the reason the LLC existed in the first place. Let me be very clear about what this means. Thaddeus had not simply diverted marital money into a private account to hide it during a divorce. He had used the firm I helped build, the firm I made legitimate before it had any right to be called legitimate, as the financial vehicle to fund a life he was building with another woman. Reva's company had been billed. The fees had gone into Orlon Capital, and those funds had quietly accumulated into a relocation nest egg for both of them. He had used our business to bankroll their future. When Dorinda laid this out in front of me, I sat completely still for almost a full minute. Then I asked her what we could do with it. She smiled for the first time since I had walked into her office 3 weeks earlier. She said quite a lot, actually. What happened next was not revenge in the way people imagine revenge. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was precise. Dorinda filed a motion in the existing divorce case, the case Thaddeus himself had initiated, to compel full financial disclosure of all entities associated with marital income. The discovery process required Orlon Capital Advisors LLC to be fully disclosed and accounted for. The 3 years of diverted revenue had to be put on the table. The opposing attorney tried 3 separate strategies to limit the scope of that discovery. Dorinda defeated every single one. Meanwhile, I reached out to a man named Fitzgerald Cole. Fitzgerald had been one of the founding clients of Thaddeus's firm. Semi-retired, meticulous with his finances, and I had always sensed, quietly loyal to me in a way that went beyond business courtesy. He had danced with me at our firm's 10th anniversary party. He had sent flowers when my father passed. I met him at a small bakery downtown. I told him, carefully and professionally, that I was conducting a review of the firm's financial history as part of a personal legal matter. I did not accuse. I did not dramatize. I simply asked whether he had ever been directed to make payments to an entity called Orlon Capital Advisors. He set down his coffee cup very slowly. I have, he said. Thaddeus told me it was a restructured billing arrangement. A few other clients got the same notice. A few others. I kept my face perfectly composed. Fitzgerald, I said, I believe you and your fellow clients may have been misled about where certain fees were being directed. I think you have the right to know that. He looked at me for a long moment.
What do you need from me? He said.
I told him I didn't need anything. I just wanted him to have the truth. He went home and made his own calls. Within 10 days, 4 of the firm's longest-standing clients had quietly engaged their own financial advisors to review fee disclosures and billing histories tied to Orlon Capital Advisors. What those advisors found confirmed what Dorinda already knew. Certain fees had been reclassified and redirected in ways that had not been disclosed to clients as required under their service agreements. This was no longer just a marital asset dispute. This was a professional conduct issue. And Fitzgerald Cole, entirely of his own volition, filed a formal complaint with the North Carolina State Board of CPA Examiners. I did not ask him to do that.
I want to be very clear about that.
I had simply given him the truth. He decided what to do with it. Now here's the moment I told you was coming. The moment nobody in that courtroom anticipated. The divorce hearing lasted 3 days. On the second day, Thaddeus's attorney introduced a witness they believed would establish that my contributions to the business were informal and non-compensable, that my work had been a spousal gesture, not a professional one, and therefore had no bearing on asset division. The witness was a former colleague of Thaddeus who intended to testify that the firm's early success was built entirely on Thaddeus's client relationships and financial expertise. What Thaddeus's legal team did not know, what Thaddeus himself had apparently forgotten, was that in 2004, during a desperate stretch when the firm was within weeks of collapse, I had personally called 14 of our friends and professional contacts and asked them to become clients. I had written the pitch letters. I had attended the first meetings. I had kept that firm breathing when Thaddeus was ready to give up. I still had every single email. Dorinda introduced them into evidence one by one. And then she introduced the final one. It was an email from Thaddeus himself, written in March of 2004, sent to me at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. It read, and I am going to read this slowly because I want you to feel the weight of it. Sari, if you hadn't made those calls, we would have been finished. I mean that completely. This firm is as much yours as mine. His words, his email, his own hand. The courtroom was very quiet after Dorinda read that aloud. Thaddeus sat at that table, and he did not look up from the surface in front of him for a long time. The settlement was finalized 4 months after I found that recipe. 50% of the firm's fully assessed value, calculated inclusive of every dollar that had passed through Orlon Capital Advisors over 38 months. The forensic accountant placed that figure at just over $870,000 in diverted marital income. The family home, mortgage-free, transferred entirely into my name. A structured education fund for Pemba, court-ordered and protected. Full legal fees paid by Thaddeus, assessed by the judge given the findings of deliberate financial concealment. And Thaddeus's license. 6 weeks after the settlement, the North Carolina State Board of CPA examiners completed their review of Fitzgerald's complaint and the supporting documentation that had emerged from discovery. They found sufficient cause to proceed with a formal disciplinary hearing. Thaddeus Orrin Belmont, the man who had spent 3 years building a financial escape hatch, who had redirected nearly $1 million in marital income, who had used the business I helped save to fund a future with another woman, surrendered his CPA license rather than face the full public hearing. Without that license, there was no firm. Without the firm, there was no Asheville plan. No funded new beginning. No carefully constructed exit into a better life. He had built an entire architecture of deception, and it had collapsed under the weight of its own foundation. The man who had planned everything had lost everything. And the woman he had planned it all against was sitting in a paid-off home, watching her daughter apply to universities and sleeping better than she had in years. I want to tell you something before I close the story. I have thought many times about the version of this where I confront Thaddeus the night I find those papers, where I walk into the living room and throw them at him and demand answers. I know exactly what would have happened. He would have had a plan for that too. He would have been ready. He would have managed my reaction, minimized the conversation, and bought himself the time he needed to finish what he started. I would have tipped him off before Dorinda could get to the finances, before the LLC could be fully exposed, before the clients ever knew to ask questions. My silence was not weakness. My silence was the only weapon I had, and I used it with absolute precision. That is what I want you to take from Serilda's story. Not just the outcome. The discipline it took to get there. She did not react.
She did not collapse.
She gathered information. She found the right people. She let the truth, the full, documented, irrefutable truth, do exactly what truth does when it is handled carefully. It burned everything down. And she walked out of the ashes with her children, her home, her finances, and herself, completely intact. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell us in the comments, what was the moment in Serilda's story that hit you the hardest? We will see you in the next one.